We're going to have the time for all ages right now, and I can't invite the children forward because there's an obstacle on our road. So we'll be doing the time for all ages from here, but it's great to have all those young in body or spirit here for the time for all ages. And this story actually comes from the pagan tradition. And it's a story of this large, old apple tree. And it's even older, and it's even bigger than me. That's how old and big it is. And it's in the center of this village. And the people love this tree. And when the apples, come forth, and they always come in the fall, usually quite close to the fall equinox, the people from the village all take the apples, and then some of them make jam from it, some of them just eat the apples, some of them dry them and make dried fruit, and some even use medicine, make apples, use the apples to make medicine. So the whole village really uses this, and then they have this big festival where they all come together and share these apples. Then one year, perhaps due to climate change, we're not really sure, the apples came early. They came before the fall equinox. So people saw the apples early and they thought, I'm not sure they're going to last till the fall equinox, so I'm going to take my apples now. So one person took some apples, another person took some apples. Somebody said, this doesn't seem as many apples this year, so they took some apples. And eventually, a week before the fall equinox, before they were going to have this big party, the tree had no apples left. And the children were really disappointed because they thought, we're not going to be able to have this big festival that we look forward to every year because there's no apples. But there was this 5 wise old women of the village and said, I think the tree did its job. I think it's us humans that didn't do the job. I think everyone took their apples. She said, just wait here. And she went home and she bought an apple from her home because she'd been one of the people who took one of the apples earlier. And said, I'm going to give this apple back to the tree. She placed it at the base of the tree. And some of the children thought, well, maybe we can get apples from our home. So they went home and they got apples and brought it. And then some people had already made jam. So they brought these pots of jam and placed it by the tree. And then other people brought these dried apples. Some people brought the medicine. And then when you looked at the tree on the fall equinox, there was all these different products of apples around the tree. And the children kind of talked to this wise old woman in the village and said, so what happened? He said, sometimes we human beings sometimes don't share as well as we could. Sometimes we see that there might be this scarcity and we take things earlier than we need or more than we need. But we just remember to share. If we just remember as a community that our role is to bring the gifts that we can to the community, then there will always be enough apples for all of us. And I think that's a great metaphor for religious community because we all bring our gifts here. People bring the gifts of music, people bring the gifts of greeting, people bring the gifts of serving on the board like Dave is. That's a gift, a sacrificial gift, but a gift. And we all bring gifts here. And we have to remember bringing what we can and share what we can when we can. So thank you very much for listening, and invite all the children to leave now for the religious education. And it's good to be with you. Invite you to join me now in the spirit of prayer, meditation, and reflection. Spirit of life and love, Spirit of this community gathered here, which through our presence makes this a sacred time and a sacred place. We gather today with hopes and dreams, and also with concerns and wounds. May we remember that we are interconnected to those around us in so many ways. May we be reminded that with life's changes, today's joys and sorrows will give way to the changes of tomorrow. And we invite those of us who have strength today to care for those around us who are struggling. And for those who are in need, allow ourselves to receive that care. For tomorrow, the roles may be reversed. May we always be open to help and be helped, to grow and to change, to forgive and ask forgiveness, to give and to receive. Spirit of love, help us to remember those who are not here with us today, but who may need our support beyond these walls. And Spirit of life, may we find strength and courage to reach out beyond our personal comfort to become the people in the community we desire to be. Help us to engage our wider community with loving kindness and compassion at our center. Let our living be a blessing to all the communities we are part of. We ask for this in the name of all that is sacred. I invite you to join me in a time of silence.
I officially joined UUFRC in December 2019. And in an online service in September 2020, I gave my first reflection as worship associate. It was on Zoom with Brian joining in from Texas while before he had actually moved out here. It was more than a little awkward. The topic was titled, "Does our name mean anything to us today?" That is, what does it mean to be Unitarian Universalist? Now, 5 years later, I can look back at a lot of changes in my life that have been influenced by this community. To me, this fellowship means being in an open-minded religious community where we can be our true selves and we can talk about important things. That's part of what differentiates between religious community and others. We can talk about life and death. We can talk about those we have lost, to mourn them, to care for those who are still here, and to celebrate new births. We can talk about our moral obligations to ourselves and each other, the meaning of the universe. Of course, we can also talk about our favorite coffee shop in Redwood City, but we can go further than that. You'll have to tell me later. It can be difficult to accept people as they truly are and to hear what they really think. Sometimes we might not like what they express. I'm struggling these days with contact with some of my family, particularly after my mother's passing. I've learned new things about my father, which I had not previously. But even with conflict, we can still treat them with dignity and try to love them while having healthy boundaries that recognize we all have our limits. We say that UUs have love at the center now. That's important, and I believe it, but a crucial part of that is that what loving means is loving people for who they are. As this is a community that doesn't try to tell people what their spiritual path is. We do not. We welcome you as new members, and you welcomed me as a new member. But it was up to me to find my path, and I found support for that new path as a unique individual, as all of our new members will each have their own paths. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone, and I feel blessed by being part of this community.
Two people can keep each other sane can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. 3 people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With 4 people, you can play bridge and start an organization. With 6, you can rent a whole house and eat pie for dinner with no seconds and hold a fundraising party. 12 makes a demonstration, 100 fills a hall, 1,000 have solidarity in your own newsletter, 10,000 power in your own paper, 100,000 your own media, 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again and they say no. It starts when you say we and you know who you mean. And each day you mean one more. Those are the words of Marge Piercy from the Low Road. So that's her definition of community. Quite expansive, I would say. But what is religious community and what makes it different? I think many of us think of religious community, perhaps especially at this time, as a source of refuge. It seems like it's a harsh world out there with harsh rhetoric and hard news, and we come here for a refuge. And I'm always amused that we often talk, we like to come and seek diversity amongst like-minded people. Peculiar. And as I've said before, I like us to think of us as being like-hearted people rather than like-minded. But this is a place that we come for comfort and strength. A place to acknowledge the wider struggles in the world, both personal and global, and we come for support, inspiration, and hope. I acknowledge that we come to religious community for that. But the very definition of community means that some are included and some are excluded. So how do we determine that boundary? Who determines that boundary? One of the things we pride ourselves on as a religious community is pluralism. We feel that Unitarian Universalism is a pluralistic religion. We have people who are agnostic, people who are atheists, people who believe in God, people who are not sure, people who maybe some days believe in God and don't. Some people before a sermon do and after a sermon don't. Or maybe that's just me. I remember growing up, I grew up in the west of Scotland, and I know Hanju mentioned Texas. This is not a Texas accent, in case you were wondering. I grew up in Scotland, and the west of Scotland has got a lot of many wonderful attributes, but there's a lot of religious bigotry, specifically Protestant Catholic there, and that actually drove me out of religion as a teenager. And it was always a loaded question when someone asked you what religion you were, because they weren't usually asking you so they could invite you to a religious community. It was often followed by a fist or a boot. So I learned to be very careful, and I was, I'm an atheist. And honestly, one person once asked me, yes, but whose God don't you believe in? That's how much bigotry there was. Even the atheist suffers religious bigotry. And of course, like many Unitarian Universalists, I left my religion and came to it from another religion. And there's always a joke about Unitarian Universalist in the desert island. He's there for years and then eventually gets rescued. And the people who rescued him said, I see you've got 3 huts in the island. Why do you have 3 huts? He said, well, the first one's my home. The second one's my church. And the third one's the church I used to belong to. So many of us do come to religion from another place. And it's always so interesting, what's the relationship, especially for new members, they come in and I remember thinking, am I going to change, or is the church open to changing with me? And I remember seeing this sign, and one of our largest churches is actually the Unitarian Universalist Church, All Souls in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's got over 1,000 people. And their motto was, don't try to change us, be prepared to be changed yourself. And I actually have a problem with that statement. I understand what they're saying, But I want us to be a community that, yes, we hope to transform people, but we hope that every one of the new members and everyone here, whether you're a visitor or whether you're a long-time member, that you change this religious community. Because we rely on one another. Today we rely on one another more than ever. And spiritual growth, as Hanju kind of elaborated, requires trust. You have to believe that we can bring our whole selves here, bring our struggles, vulnerabilities, as well as our hopes and dreams. We often talk about religious community as a safe space. And I don't think we can say it's a safe place. And I'm not sure it should be a safe place. I think it should be a place of challenge and a place of comfort and a place of support. But it needs to be a brave space, not necessarily a safe space, because I don't think we can guarantee that. We will all make mistakes. And we may offend someone, but one of the things about the covenant that we did with new members and the covenant we have with one another as a covenantal community, we agreed to be called back into covenant and to call others back into covenant. It's an aspiration of how we want to be with one another. And the writer Mickey Scottby says this about creating brave space. Together we will create brave space, because there's no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world, we all carry scars, and we all have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be as we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it. I saw one of the best and most powerful examples of brave space when I was teaching our whole lives to the San Francisco and Oakland high school community. Our whole lives is our sexuality curriculum, which is a wonderful curriculum that goes far beyond the typical sexuality curriculums, exploring the deep struggles that we have through the changes in our life. And one of the classes that we were teaching was about body image. The struggles that these were high school youth struggling with body image. So we were doing this over a whole weekend, and it was a Friday night, and we decided to put body image one at the end from 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock, and then 10 to 12 we were having overnight, a kind of party, pizza, all the things that high school, the enticement for the high schoolers to do the class. Fun. And so we put the class at the end, 9 till 10, because I thought maybe there'll be more talk there. And the first 40 minutes of the conversation, and there was 20 youth, and it was 10 female, 10 male, and they were still getting to know each other. And it was kind of as you'd maybe expect for a body image discussion. The youth were talking about the females, the young women were talking about their struggles with body image, because we all know the media pressure on women around how they look. And that kind of went as we expected. And then one of the young men from the San Francisco church, he was small in stature but very athletic, and I knew he was a very good sports person, said, "Oh yeah, I struggle with my own body image because of my height." And that opened it up. And then some of the other young men started sharing their struggles with body image. And then there was this other young man there who just burst out crying and said, "I hate my body. I hate my body." And we were all kind of taken aback. But what was beautiful about this, the fact that he was willing to share it, was how the whole community supported him. And especially the young woman who have wrestled with body image for so long were able to support that young man. And it built this intimacy and trust between them that was absolutely incredible. That was brave space. That was love coming into the room to hold these young men in pain who were willing to share something really vulnerable. That's what religious community can be. That's why we need to create brave space. There was nothing comfortable about that situation. But real growth comes when we can transcend our need for comfort and step in to life as it is and move towards life as we want it to be. I will always remember that. And I remember about 10, 15, about 15 minutes afterwards, we said, would you like to move on to have the dance and pizza? And he said, no, let's keep this discussion going. That discussion went on till midnight. 3 hours. These 90 youth were talking about the struggles with body image, about media, wide-ranging discussion. That's what religious community at its best can provide. That's what we want this religious community to be. And that's the power of when you have an open discussion about these taboo subjects like sexuality and sexual education. And we as a religious community support that. And we are looking to run our OWL program for our younger and possibly high schoolers in the spring. So if any of you are interested in that, please come and talk to me. It's an incredible program. How many people here have had the children go through OWL? Please talk to them as well. I mean, I think you'll affirm what a powerful... What's that? You went through it yourself? And do you agree? I mean, and we have to create spaces for these powerful moments. Because Unitarian Universalism, at its fundamental, is relational. And love, the support and love and courage is one of the greatest forces in interconnection. But ultimately what religious community does, it fills a heart-shaped hole in all of our lives. Religious community fills this heart-shaped hole in all of our lives because we don't always get reminded elsewhere in the world, elsewhere in community through the media that we are loved. Media usually reminds us we have pockets to be emptied of our money. But religious community needs a higher purpose than our self-preservation. It needs to be more than gathering as like-minded people for our own comfort. Religious community is the carer and nurturer of our souls, both as individuals and as a community. And community is hard work. Democratic, inclusive, brave community is even harder work. It's not comfortable. But we have to be here and coming together to serve a larger goal than just our self-fulfillment. We need that goal of healing our world. We come together for support, but we come together to get that inspiration, that hope, that strength to go out and heal the world. We all know the different things that need to be healed, both within ourselves and in the wider world. We come here to get the inspiration, hope, and to do it, not just to feel good about ourselves. The sacred, the divine, God in some people's language, I believe is at the intersection of our conscience and our consciousness. That's where the sacred is. I invite you all to think, what does your consciousness, or what does your intersection between your conscience and your consciousness tell you to do now? If we want the world to improve, we need to do something different this coming week than we've done this past week. I invite you to think, what are you going to do differently?